Welcome back, everyone. You're watching We Heart Therapy. I'm your host, Dr. Bell, aka Annabelle Bugatti, licensed marriage and family therapist here in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. And I'm also president of the Southern Nevada Community for Emotionally Focused Therapy. And I am just extraordinarily blessed and excited to have Dr. Sue Johnson back on my show. And we are doing a special edition today. So for those of you who do or don't know, Sue Johnson is responsible for pioneering this incredible model of counseling known as emotionally focused therapy. And, she has really put in a lot of work and she's faced a lot of adversity to become a pioneer in our field. And, her model of counseling has earned the gold standard according to the APA, which is a huge deal. And she's just an incredible woman. So today we're just going to do sort of like a biographical interview with Sue about her life, about what it's been like for her to become a pioneer, to be a leader in the field, especially as a woman, and all of the blocks and adversity that she's faced. As I'm hoping many of you out there that are leaders, you've faced a lot of adversity and challenges, and it's very lonely, and a lot of people don't talk about the things that you face or have to go through when you're trying to create something big and be a leader. And, it can feel very isolating. And so I hope that you guys will feel inspired by Sue and what she has to share, and that it'll encourage you on your own journey in leadership. So welcome back, Sue. Thank you so much for being with us today and just sharing with us about your life and your journey.
You're welcome. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I want to inquire, where did you get your beautiful British accent from?
Well, that's kind of ironic because if you listened to me as a little girl, you definitely would not have thought that I had a beautiful British accent. I had a very working class Cockney accent. So you'd have heard me say, I don't want to, okay? I don't like that. No, I'm not doing that. What you think? No, I'm not doing it. And you'd have heard me using strange words like, instead of getting upset, we used to say things like, don't you get stroppy with me, okay? And words like this. So the point is, by a series of accidents, which I've never, to tell you the truth, been totally clear about, I was an English working class kid who ended up being sent to this upper class Catholic, I was not Catholic girls' school run by the nuns. And my mother told me, we are sending you there to lose your accent. And that was very perceptive because in England, I think this is still true. In England, the minute you open your mouth, you are assigned a class. Okay? I think it's different in America. It might be the clothes you wear or the words you use, but I think in Europe, it's still your accent. So what she was really saying is, we want you to be perceived as middle class, not lower class. And she was right about that in terms of the opportunities that English society offered. So gradually, I can't tell you when it happened, I started to talk like this, which is the way the nuns taught, right? I'm sure they corrected me. I'm sure they would have said, Susan, you do not choose that word here, and they were amazing women. They were St. Joseph's teaching nuns. On the one hand, when you looked at the beliefs they had, they were very traditional Catholic beliefs, pretty misogynist, really, and on the other hand, they were amazingly intelligent women who, ironically, because they made you learn Christian doctrine, I used to have to stand and recite bits of the Bible off by heart, okay? So they made you do that. At the same time, they taught you how to think and philosophy and how to argue. In fact, I got through graduate school in Canada on what the nuns taught me, because they
Wow.
taught me how to take an argument apart. They
Mhm.
taught me how to think. They taught me how to reason, how to write an argument. So they were an interesting group, but they taught me how to talk like this.
Yeah. So so Cockney, like when you say Cockney accent, like what city or region would that be
Oh,
associated?
just south of London,
South of
on the
London.
road to Dover,
Oh.
an English working class town. It used to be a naval town,
Hmm.
and then the government took the navy out of the town, and the town just died.
Mm.
But when I was a young child,
Mm.
the town was alive. It was full of sailors
Mhm.
carousing, getting drunk, going to music halls, going to brothels, fighting.
Yeah.
It was full of life. Okay.
Yeah.
And then when I was about 10 years old, the government came in and closed the navy down, and the whole town just
Died.
shrunk.
Yeah.
But it was an alive little town when I was young, and my parents had a pub.
Mm. So you were raised by your mom and dad?
Yes. And my granny,
Mm.
it's very important to me,
Mm.
and who still has, I realized, impacted the way I eat. I eat very strange things, like terrible stinky blue cheese, which the rest of my family thinks is absolutely horrible.
It does taste good. I say when I was a kid, I hated it, but now it's good.
Well, Marmite on toast, which everyone goes, oh.
Yeah, Marmite, or it's like in Australia, Vegemite.
And Turkish Delight, which is pure sugar.
Yeah.
And ginger, pure ginger. My granny used to sit me on her knee and feed. Can you imagine feeding a child, Marmite sandwiches and ginger and Turkish Delight? I mean, good Lord. But anyway,
you needed the ginger to keep your stomach from feeling upset between the sugar and the Marmite.
Right. But I had a pretty strange childhood. I mean, I had talk about a childhood that teaches you there's more than one reality.
And I once heard someone say that children accept the reality that's presented to them. So it's really interesting that you're talking about having more than one reality. And so you grew up in this home. So you had mom and dad, and granny lived with you. And did you have siblings, or was it just you?
No siblings, but you have to think that in the pub, it's an English working class pub, so it's really a community. There were no children in the streets around me. The only children I interacted with were at school, and they were all upper class Catholic.
Snobs.
They spoke like this. Okay.
Proper.
And they were picked up in the Daimler at the end of the school. I had to go on 3 buses home. Right. So, and we didn't even have a phone. Okay. So that was sort of the only, young people I was around for years and years and years, until I joined a cathedral choir when I was an adolescent, which was very beautiful for me. But I had about 50 uncles and aunties, because everyone who came into the pub, everyone, the admiral, the captain, and the tramp, who my mother used to feed breakfast to, and the man who stood on the corner and sold papers, everyone was uncle or auntie. And my father told me a little bit later in life that my favorite auntie, the one I really loved, Auntie Nancy, who always wear bright red high-heeled shoes and bright red lipstick, was basically the pub lady of the night. She was the escort service for our little pub. And who cares? I don't care. I loved her. She used to, play with me and talk to me. And it was quite a strange way to bring up a child, because I was surrounded by adults, safe adults, because I was, my father was there all the time, and he would have killed anybody who'd ever, but, and they would all interact with me and talk to me. So I think this had a huge impact on the way I developed as a child, because I was always interacting with adults, and I was encouraged by my father, to be real. Like he loved it if I said to somebody, I think that's a silly thing to say. I don't think that's true at all. He'd love it. He'd laugh and joke and say, she's just told you you're silly, Sid. You're silly because my daughter knows that you're silly. I mean, he'd celebrate this, So in other words, I was given lots of freedom and leeway and safety in this huge, varied adult world where I watched people fight, comfort each other, make up, have
a lot of complex situations for a child to sort of observe and take in.
Oh, when I look on it now, people were having PTSD flashbacks.
Wow.
And my father was going in and holding them and, comforting them. And I didn't know what they were. I just knew that sometimes Uncle Bill turned strange and started yelling. And then everyone got around Uncle Bill, lowered Uncle Bill to the floor and started talking in quiet voices. I didn't know what I was looking at, but
I got
the message that emotion was manageable anyway.
So how were emotions done in your family growing up? Since this is a question we always ask, right?
Well, on the one hand, my family was quite traditional. My father was a sailor. I mean, if you'd watched my father and mother, my father was the withdrawer, and my mother was hell on wheels. She'd have given any EFT therapist, lots of luck managing her. She was wild. I don't know if you'd have called her a demander. She was the most aggressive human being I've ever met.
Wow.
And she was small, and she was a fighter. And she told me the only virtue that matters in life is courage. That's it. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. And
which I imagine being a woman in a naval town, and working in a bar, and being short, being a small human, like everything seemed big and you had to become big in order to keep up and survive,
Well, she was the scary one. If things got out of hand, and I'd be standing there on a little stool cleaning glasses, because the idea that if a working class kid, you were supposed to help, okay? There was nothing about playing and watching television. So I was cleaning glasses. If things got out of hand, particularly on a Friday night, when people would get paid and they'd get drunk, my mother, who always wore a black suit, right, would reach behind her and grab a bottle, could be a bottle of sherry. Imagine how heavy a full bottle of sherry is. Yeah. Just reach behind her, walk out into the fray, whatever was going on, and say, "Hey, boys, behave." Right? And if they didn't, she'd crown somebody.
Yeah.
Okay, there was no messing about. So I think people consider
kept that business going, because if they had gotten into fights and torn up the bar, that would have been their livelihood.
Well, I remember when I was an adolescent being in London, and these two very, very, very upper class women laughing at us in an elevator in a store that really we didn't really belong in. I don't know what we were doing there. It was much too expensive for us. But they were laughing at us, and they were saying things like, "Oh my God, they've let the riffraff in here," and they were messing about with the elevator so that our buttons would never come up.
Oh, how cruel. How did you feel about that?
I don't know. I think I was about 12, and I stood there. My mother stepped towards them and said, "I wouldn't do that if I were you, because I'll put your teeth down your throat." And she meant it, and they listened, and they stopped. And I remember thinking, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. See, that impressed me. The trouble is, of course, her aggression sometimes came towards me, which wasn't so good.
Well, like all good pursuers, her that ability to fight had its place and could do a lot of good and a lot of protection, but without a lot of control over it, she didn't realize how it bled over into places where it might not be so good.
No, and by the time I was an adolescent, her and I were in a war, of course.
Yeah.
Straight war.
Yeah. Though, Sue, I will have to say you are a bit of a fighter, because you would have never been able to get where you are without having that fighting spirit in you, even if you don't display it as like aggressive anger towards others. You don't walk around, I'm assuming, or never did, like, threatening to put people's teeth down their throat, but you're still a fighter in your own way,
Absolutely. If you weren't a fighter when I was growing up in English working class England, well, I don't know what you would have been. All my family except my father said that maybe I could be a hairdresser or a nurse. But the idea of me going to university was ridiculous, because all I needed to do was find a man with a suit and marry him. And my father said, she's passed the exams, she's going to university. And that's that. But the bottom line is, I remember going on the bus to meet this man, this government official, and realizing that even if I had passed these A-levels, these exams, if this man did not agree that I should get a government grant for the 3 years of my university, that I wouldn't be able to go because my family didn't have the money. So I remember sitting there on that bus and thinking, this man has all this power over me. It's like, if he says no for any reason, what am I going to do, right? And I felt very trapped because he didn't say no. So I went off to university, which, I was a freak at university. I was I was this little working class mouse with a skirt about 2 inches from my ankles and no makeup, and
didn't quite fit in. You didn't feel like you fit in. But so what you're saying to me, though, so we rewind, it sounds like that wasn't necessarily a foreign experience for you. You're saying, like with that experience with those ladies in the elevator, sort of saying you don't belong here, but then also your awareness as a young child that other kids are riding different buses, going to different schools, speaking differently. Like it sounds like as early as you developed awareness, sort of had this idea of self and other and not sort of fitting in where others are. Would that feel fair?
Yes, I was an outsider, to be honest. In some ways, I've always been an outsider in my life, and I still am. Any big institution I've ever worked for, I've ended up telling them to go to hell at some point. Okay.
Which takes a lot of courage.
Well, I don't know if it does, but it's quite interesting when I tell you that, because it's true. It's like, what is that? I somehow learned, maybe from my mother, that the way to get by is to be as gracious and pleasant as you can be. But if somebody comes for you, then that's that.
Don't let them mess with you.
Don't let them mess with you, because you know what? And I still believe this. If you let them mess with you, the messing continues.
Yeah.
We all seem to think that if we let people mess with us, they'll calm down, they'll be nice. No, they won't. If you let people mess with you. So, when I look back on it, it's been times in my life when I just don't know where that assertiveness came from. I don't know whether it came from my mother or my father, but there's something English working class about it, which is don't you, pull my buttons, as they would say, or, don't you, because I'll fight you. Well,
it sounds very much like, again, sort of par for the course of growing up in a pub where you had to fight and survive in a naval town. I mean, and your mom and your dad. I mean, it was just this constant reinforced message all around you. So of course it's going to wear off on you. And, and of course, through your lifetime of becoming a therapist and, a pioneer, you've learned how to nuance that. Obviously there's ways to, get, respectful ways to get people to not mess with you. And then there's ways that can be, very rough. Well, just nicely.
My first job after graduating, I was teaching in this little college in Oxfordshire. And one of the classes I was teaching, which was a bit bizarre because they're only 21 years old, was this group of businessmen who were like 40 or something. And, they all thought it was ridiculous that I was their teacher. And they said they wouldn't do what I was asking. So I said, okay, then every class I'm going to teach you existential philosophy, and you'll have all this homework. And at every class, you will do a test of existential philosophy. And if you don't get 70 on all of them, I'll fail the hell out of you. There was a long silence. And then they decided I was okay. What was interesting was my boss said to me, can you imagine this? This is my first job. He says, Sue, there's been a complaint. I said, a complaint? He said, yes. There's been a complaint by the head of business studies that there's like 12 men in this class of about 40, okay? There's been a complaint from the head of business studies that after you've taught them, they are unruly. Unruly? Yes, they are unruly. They are. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, they are making jokes and they are sort of lively and they are difficult for the next teacher to handle. And I sat there and I said, right. So I said, and where did I get the moxie? I don't know. I said, Harry, you wouldn't be trying to tell me that the people in this college are implying that I'm sexually turning these guys on, would you? You wouldn't be trying to tell me that. Let me guess that you told me, the head of business studies, that I was such a good teacher. Isn't that what you did, Harry? And he looks at me and that was that. It's like, so I thought, oh no, we're not doing that. But I had a lot of that in that college. People would spy on my classes. I'd find two of the faculty lying on the floor, watching me teach a drama class through the cracks in the partition. And I walk up to them and say, hi guys, what are you doing? Trying to find out if the drama teacher's doing something naughty? Oh my God. So I had a lot of that. I must say, when I came to North America, it improved.
Okay, so I want to sort of go backwards because there's a lot of questions I want to ask before we get too far ahead. So sorry, guys, if you're watching, because this is all fabulous. And I want to I love painting your attachment history here, Sue. This is amazing, sort of how Sue became who she is. And so, one big question that sort of comes up on my mind is when you're this kid in this pub, did you ever have a friend that was a child ever? Did you ever befriend another child? Never.
There were no children. Every single person around me was an adult. My grandmother was a friend. Her and I would make pastry together. I'm still a mean pastry cook, okay? My grandmother, I've never made hard pastry in my life. I don't know how people do it. My grandmother and I would play and sing, and I had aunties all over. The cleaning lady was called Auntie Nellie. She had one tooth in the middle of her and a huge belly covered with a very dirty apron. Her and I used to play hide and seek. But
so you did play, but it wasn't necessarily with kids. It was with other adults.
And I think that changes a lot. And of course, you have to understand that when I went to school, I was really an outsider. I spoke differently. My clothes were different because my family couldn't pay for a new uniform every year. So some uniform was too big, then it was fit, and then it was too small.
This is when you went to the Catholic school.
Yeah.
How old were you? So your husband sent us a picture, which, I'm going to pop on in this cute little jumper. Now, how old were you in the picture?
I think I was about 3, and I was at the market in my very, 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 very best coat, which had a velvet collar, and it was the only one I had. But when I was 4, if you can believe, I can't believe my parents did this. I was a year too young. When I was 4, I was given to an adolescent girl that I'd never met and put on a bus and sent 2 towns away to this Catholic school where all the women were dressed in black. Everybody talked about hell, atonement, sin. All the pictures on the walls were of martyrs. And, I was, to say I did not belong. And I think if you'd seen pictures of me as a young adolescent, all the other girls, the nice Catholic girls, all smiling, and me, I'm in the back going, I've got my arms across my chest, and I'm like, and by that time I was what they call in England stroppy. I was stroppy. I was
stroppy.
Sorry, stroppy. Like, don't mess with me. Like, I found out later that the nun who used to teach us philosophy was terrified of me, which was funny because I was terrified of her.
Yeah.
But I wrote to her when she was an old lady, and I said, I was terrified of you. And she said, oh my God, that was funny because you were the most terrifying student I ever had. So apparently that was because, when I was about 13, she would make pronouncements, right? Like, the Pope is infallible, right? I would say, no, I don't think so.
You had a rebellious side.
Yes, and being a wonderful teacher, she'd let me say why. And I'd say, no, that was only decided just a few years ago, and I think he's made all kinds of mistakes. And no, I don't think, and he's human being. I don't believe human beings infallible. But those women taught philosophy, and I could make arguments, and that nun, she'd tolerate me. I mean, when I think on it, she'd tolerate me. Yeah, I was the rebel. I was the one that said, and that went into graduate school. I can remember hearing some famous person, who was he? Came from England, talking about emotion. I was the strange counseling student who joined all the clinical students in their classes just because I wanted to. And I remember sitting at the back listening to this man, and he was pontificating about emotion. This was in maybe the first year of graduate school. And he's announcing all these things, announcing. So I remember sitting there, and I put up my hand and said, none of this makes any sense to me. I don't agree with you at all. I don't think emotion is like this at all. Here's my perception of emotion. Where the hell did I get the guts to do that? I have no idea. But I did. I was the
from the sailors.
Oh, it must. All right, sailors taught me. Okay, from my dad. Yes. My dad was my main attachment figure, and he was an uneducated country boy who ran away to the Navy, and he was the most spectacular attachment dad you could ever imagine. I do not know how he knew how to do that. I just know that he was
how to love.
Yeah, he was.
Well, Sue, don't you say that it kind of is hardwired into us? It's sort of some of our upbringings that may rewire it, but
the way he did it, though, he grew up in a brutal working class family where his father used to hit him regularly, like 9 kids living in 2 rooms. How did he know?
Yeah.
How on earth did he know how to nurture me? Things would happen. I don't know. Like, I remember when I was about 18 being at some sort of do where we were meeting the Conservative MP for the area, who was very, traditional old guy. And we were in this receiving line, and he asked me something. And I answered, and he put me down. I can't remember what he said, but he said something patronizing and put me down. And what I always remember is my father reached across and said to him, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." And then
So he
I went,
stood up for you. He protected you.
I wouldn't do that if I were you. And that was an entry for me to go for this dude, right? But
Yeah.
he adored my intelligence, my rebellion.
Mm.
He adored it. And I think that had a huge impact. He didn't just accept it, he
Nurtured it.
celebrated. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like he saw this part of you and really cultivated it and saw it as an asset and something that could really take you a lot of places that maybe he never been. And it did take.
I think that's true. He was proud of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So you went to Catholic school when you were 4. That's when you got shipped away. No,
I wasn't shipped away. I still slept at home,
still
but I
slept
was
at
there
home.
all day. And I stayed at that school till I was 17.
17. So all of your school age years growing up with the nuns at school, and it sounds like constantly being, so it's like these two like opposite forces. Like you have society constantly telling you, Sue, you don't fit in, you're not good enough. But then at home, feeling so loved and welcomed and celebrated. So how did you end up feeling amidst the two of those? How did you feel about yourself growing up?
That's a good question. I think I mostly felt like an outsider, and that I had to, somehow that made me vigilant and ready to fight. So
yeah,
there was a girl with a very, very, very upper class accent who used to put me down all the time. And I remember the other girls in the class coming to me and saying that I was being mean to her. I was being mean to Angela because I would reply to her, right, in a very cutting way. And would I stop? And I remember saying, no, I won't stop. I like it. And that was me being like, no, I'm going to fight here. I'm going to fight. So for me to go to university was revolutionary. It was a way out. Basically, I think my father understood, he wanted a way out. He went into the Navy. And I think he understood that I wanted a way out. And the only way I could see was to go to university. And career counseling consisted of this enormously tall nun saying to me, Susan, you may go to university and you may study history or English literature. Choose. So what? I didn't even know anything about psychology. So I said, I choose English literature, sister. She said, good. And that was that. That was like finish. That was so. I went to university and studied English literature. And
was it to groom you to be a teacher? Was that sort of what women were?
I don't think anyone knew what it was, but that was all it made you right for, right? But
yeah, well, it didn't really paint this way for women to have a lot of career choice. And what time in history would you have been going to university? Was this like the 50s? Was this the 60s, 70s?
I am trying to remember now exactly. I think I was too young, right? But I finished my degree, I think, in 68. I went and I didn't know what to do. So I went to London and took this adult education course. And I was a rebel because they said I was too young to take the adult education course because I was only 21. But they did the interview with me and they let me in. So I was an experiment. And
well, what's interesting, so you sort of grew up during like the 50s and the 60s, it sounds like, coming of age and sort of in societal history. And I'm not sure how much England differed from America in that way, because obviously I didn't grow up in England, but it seemed like sort of the careers women were shaped for, aside from being a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home wife, it was a teacher, or secretary, or maybe like a stenographer or whatever. But women weren't encouraged to become, PhDs and get graduate degrees.
Oh, are you kidding? No. And, I thought of coming into North America as pure escape. Okay, when people say, well, what did you want when you came to North America? I came as a graduate student because that's the way I could get into Canada, okay?
Yeah.
But to do an MA in English literature, by which time I was bored with English literature, but I came. It was pure escape. It was, my granny reminded me that apparently when I was about 11, in the kitchen, and we lived in this damp little house with just one little coal fire for heat, right? I remember in the kitchen, apparently I said to her when I was about 11, I'm getting out of here. And she said, what do you mean? The kitchen or, the town? And apparently I said, she had an amazing memory, so I believe her. She said, no, you said to me, I'm getting out of England. So I think I always felt like I wanted out. I wanted a bigger world. And for me, Canada was that bigger world. And indeed it was. I mean, I came here as a graduate student and everything was different. There wasn't so much misogyny. There was a lot more wealth, a lot more openness.
A lot more opportunity for people to become,
a lot more opportunity
to rise up.
And I started acting, which was...
What is acting?
Yeah, I was an actress for a couple of years. And
that's hilarious. I grew up in Southern California, and I also grew up, my family wasn't very well off. Also picked on a lot and always felt like an outsider. And I also, Hollywood was not too far away and, tried my hand at that for a while. And, here I am, a therapist. So,
What I remember is saying to my friend, I'm going to quit the acting thing. And first of all, you can't live on it. Okay. I was in graduate school and acting and, I had no money. And I said, I'm going to quit. And she said, why are you quitting? I said, because all I get is tart parts. Tarts are like, sexual. I said, I'm tired of playing tarts. I had bright red hair at the time and an amazing figure. Okay.
You were a ginger growing up, Sue? Oh my gosh. Really?
Basically, yeah. And then I dyed my hair redder and redder and redder, right? So I see why I got tart parts, it was quite reasonable, really. But for me, it was, I'm not doing this. So I ended up having a fight with every organization I've ever been in, I end up fighting with the boss.
I think, Sue, part of it is you're so smart and you learned to, also growing up around adults, you've learned to see, it's like you had an old soul that matured very fast, and the nuns taught you how to think for yourself. And so you've always used your mind to sort of challenge the status quo, which I think is part of what makes a good leader, is people who are willing to challenge the status quo, but people who are also willing to put in the tough fights because they are difficult and extremely painful to ruffle feathers. And sometimes you have to. And, it's interesting also that you talk about feeling like an outsider, because so many leaders that I talk to have that same feeling of feeling like an outsider.
You don't belong. And I think what I did with that is, okay, then. All right, then. I don't belong. All right, then. So I don't belong. So,
it feels like it gives you nothing to lose. So,
it's like, I don't belong, so I'm not going to try and belong to you. You can go to hell. So that ended up with me telling the head of the English department that I didn't want his MA. And, and then I went and looked for a job, and I found a job in this counseling center for disturbed adolescents. And that
changed
everything because I started to take courses in psychology and counseling, and I loved the kids.
How old would you have been at this point?
I don't know. Somewhere in my 20s. But I loved the kids, and we didn't know what we were doing. Let's be clear. Okay.
But what I find interesting too, Sue, is that you grew up not playing with children. So I find it fascinating that, you fell so in love with working with the kids. It's like sort of getting to be around the kids that you never got to be around growing up, but in a safe kind of way. If they're troubled adolescents, in some ways you could relate, because these are kids being picked on that don't fit in, so a part of you had this big heart for them, but also maybe fascinated because they were people you never got to interact with growing up,
Characters. The first therapy case I was assigned to, if you can believe, I love ICEEFT these days. I'm doing all kinds of ICEEFT, individual EFT. Mm-hmm. But, when I think back on it, I talked about this at the Networker, I think, on one of their evening things. The first kid I was assigned to, Lee, wouldn't talk. Okay, so I'm told, go and do therapy with this kid. So I sit there. I try to talk to the kid. The kid looks at me, looks away. And he was scared of the saliva in his mouth. So he gradually, and then I'd have to say things like, Lee, go to the washroom and spit. And he'd do it, and then he'd come back and he wouldn't talk. So for the first, 10 sessions of psychotherapy I ever did in my life, this kid wouldn't talk. So then what did I do? I'd talk about, I'm so glad we're having this session. And I understand that it's hard for you to talk. And look at that bird there. I work like crazy. And then finally, this kid started to talk to me. And he was the weirdest kid. Do you know what he looked like? He looked like Kramer on
Seinfeld.
Yes, he looked like a 12-year-old Kramer, okay, with the hair, and the buttoned up.
Maybe back then it probably was Kramer as a young kid.
But he and I became buds, and he started standing up to these bullies and in the cottage, and he would stand up to them and he'd look at me and he'd go. Right, and I go back, right, and I love the kids, and I love.
Look at that, Sue. You helped a kid stand up for themselves.
Yes,
like you learned how to stand up for yourself.
Yes, and then I started taking all these courses, and I fell in love with psychology, and went and found a way to do a PhD, and then I fell in love. What
was it like for a woman to get into a PhD program back then?
It was difficult for me. Why? They put up all kinds of barriers. The head of department decided I was difficult and didn't want me in the program. I wasn't that difficult. Anyway, so but I got in, and I was insane. When I look back on it now, I was insane, okay? I was on fire, obsessed. I can't tell you when I look. I took twice as many courses as I needed for my PhD. I went and took all the clinical courses as well as the counseling courses.
You were hungry for learning.
I was hungry, and my thesis was, when I look back on it now, it was the first study of EFT. It's outrageous. Okay, as the head of department said to me, who hated me, she said, I don't know who you think you are, but this thesis project is bigger than any of our faculty have ever attempted.
Oh, look at you, Sue, rule breaker again, acting out of your status, right?
And I said to her, well, that says more about your faculty than about me, doesn't it? So I'm going to do it.
Oh, amen.
But when I look back on it now, it nearly killed me.
Oh, yeah. So I want to hear more about that. And we have another picture of you, and this is supposed to be you in grad school. You're reading a book. Is this during your PhD program?
Yes. And, I was just on fire learning to work with couples, and I had no idea.
What made you so you worked with the kids. What made you sort of pivot into couples from working with adolescents?
I didn't. I ended up for my last placement being sent to this agency
Mhm.
And they said, oh, good. You're a little bit older and you've worked with groups and individuals and families. So all our couples therapists are sick right now. So we know you're only really supposed to have to do 2 cases a week. But would you mind if you came in 3 days a week and did a couple on the hour every hour? And see, I tell you how nuts I was. I said, sure. I said, sure, how hard can it be? And then I saw my first couple. Oh my God. Like I thought, oh, nothing works. Like nothing works with these guys. They want to kill each other. And I went to the library and everything was nothing. Well, first of all, there was analytic stuff about how they were all in collusion. That didn't help. Then there was Neil Jacobson, who was just down the coast in Seattle, saying all you had to do was teach them skills. That didn't work. So I thought,
basically, Sue, you were coming up in a time where the field was actually male dominated as opposed to female dominated like it is now.
sweetheart, the field, let's not have any illusions. The field of psychology, even though there's a lot of brilliant women, it is still male dominated. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like, believe me,
Mhm.
I've stood on the stage enough times with 6 men and they're all in their sweaters and jeans and I'm in a business suit and I know why I'm in a business suit. So that's still around. Okay.
What was that like for you to be outnumbered, to have every barrier, ridiculous barriers put in your place just because you're a woman?
It was annoying. Like when I did the results for the first study, I wrote it up for the most prestigious journal I could, Journal of Consulting and Clinical Psych.
Mm-hmm.
And they took it. And everyone was like, oh my God.
Uh-huh.
And I got a professorship on the basis of that. But I was shocked. Okay. Mm-hmm. So then.
And you published solo or with somebody else?
There's Greenberg in the beginning because he was my advisor. Although he was never really into couples, individual therapy was always his thing. And then I started publishing on my own, especially about attachment, because I realized it was all about attachment. Mm-hmm. And I mean, my articles would get not just rejected, they'd get, well, I remember a 6-page single-spaced diatribe review that basically said I was incompetent, dangerous, pathetic, misguided. I'd get this stuff, and
you were challenging the norm. Also,
was I ever
anti-attachment?
Was I ever? And people would tell me, "No, you're crazy. This is all about differentiation, individuation. This is what we're doing here, making people separate." And I'd say, "No, actually, we're not. People can only be separate if they're connected first." And people were getting enraged at me. And so, yeah, for a number of years, it was quite frustrating. And I remember saying to my wonderful husband, I don't think I can keep doing this. It's too depressing. I think I'll go and do depression research.
Yeah.
And then I would go and work with my couples and get turned on. And what I did that saved my life was I went and taped my couples, of course, and watched them again and again and again, and saw the reality, saw the patterns, the things the conversations that changed people. And of course, it turned me on. And then around really only after about 2000, adult attachment started coming sort of in. There's lots of people who write about it, but my favorites are Phil Shaver, who's at Davis, and Mario Michelanza, who's in Israel, because for me, they have the cleanest view of adult attachment. And they started writing, and suddenly it was quite weird. Instead of being sort of castigated and having to fight to have my articles accepted, I would find myself the only clinician in a group of expert attachment people. I think, oh my goodness me, like, what am I doing here? And then they turn and say things like, Sue, would you kindly tell us how to turn this concept into therapy? And I'd go, and but I try. And attachment started to grow, and EFT started to grow, and our research started to grow. And I thought, well, maybe we can really contribute to the field of couples therapy. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if it's arrogant or not, but I think we've changed the field of couples therapy. Mm-hmm. And we've changed, I hope, we're starting to change people's idea about romantic love, which mm-hmm. is not a mystery, mm-hmm. and it's not dangerous. Right. And we can, what you understand the structure of, you can shape. Mm-hmm. I think we have contributed to the field of couple therapy, and now I think we're busy contributing to the field of individual therapy with ICEEFT. So it's been an amazing journey, and I've been joined by a lot of wonderful colleagues on the way. But in the beginning,
oh my gosh, well, along the way, I mean, so okay, so let's sort of put this in perspective. So, when you were coming of age, coming into grad school, so, society had come off like the Dr. Spock era, of like tough it out, the self-soothing, everything. And Bowlby was sort of one of the first people to even open the door of attachment and say, hey, maybe like our connection to other humans, the quality matters to our health and our well-being, and I think about like coming off the Industrial Revolution around the globe, people often stayed in marriages for the same reason they stayed in bad jobs, was, economic survival. That's and right. Happiness and love. These were like concepts for a better off, more enlightened culture, where their everyday survival, wasn't threatened. So people walked around living in survival mode in early culture and not even being able to think about happiness or love as an essential ingredient for life. They just, well, I made this decision, I got to survive. We just make decisions from that place. And then as we became better off as a culture, as a society, we start to thrive more. Then they start realizing, hey, maybe like if we're going to stay in these, it might be important for our health, our well-being. As people were becoming alcoholics and suicide rates were up, depression, PTSD, they're like, maybe like there's something more to this, and enter attachment.
Well, I think it's important to note that marriage, the nature of marriage has changed from an economic to an emotional mm-hmm. Enterprise. Mm-hmm. And that is because the status of women in society has changed. Mm-hmm. And women's needs and longings have started to be listened to rather than seen as somehow a sign of weakness or frailty or their inferiority. And women have started to have the ability to walk away from a relationship or to say, what I need in this relationship is, and I think it's tied, the way marriage has changed is tied very much to the rise of women. I'm a real feminist. I think that. And
people don't have to be stuck because of finances or economics. They have more choice, which means, if we're going to make this work, we have to consider needs, consider each other's feelings, versus like, oh, well, I'm just going to treat you however I'm going to, and you're just going to have to take it because you can't afford to go anywhere else.
That's right. But I think it's also more than you can't afford. It's that more and more we've started to recognize, women have started to stand up and say, hey, I matter and I count. And I just read this incredible book. What's it called? Something like Hidden Warriors, about women as in combat, in war. And it's an incredible book. It's quite new. And what it basically points out is that it's not that women have wanted the right to go and kill people. That's not the point. The women have wanted to be seen as strong, competent, able to be leaders, able to be tough if they needed to be. In other words, able to be the equal of a man. Whether they had big shoulders to carry stuff into war or not, women wanted to be seen as competent. And I think that is happening, has happened.
And so that's what you went to war for. You went to war on behalf of women. I mean, again, a male dominated field. And, again, at a time, so we had the sexual revolution in the end of the 60s and the 80s. You have more of the women's liberation, so some of those societal movements were helping this along. But at the time that you were achieving higher education, it was still, very more rare than common for women.
Yes, it really was. I mean, I think maybe because I was working class, but I just assumed, that I was going to have to fight, for everything. I mean,
And you
maybe
did.
some of those other girls maybe didn't, but I assumed because that was the world I grew up in.
Or maybe they didn't have the courage to fight for it, or know that, if you do fight successfully, there's something on the other side. They might not have had as much success in fighting for something as you have. And so you knew, like, some fights are worth fighting. And that is a hallmark of a good leader, right? Is that on behalf of, the people they serve, they know that some feathers have to be ruffled, some changes have to be made, and you have to be willing to endure that discomfort in order to make those changes.
That's right. Personally, I found it very challenging to lead ICEEFT, the International Center for Excellence in EFT, all these years. I never chose. If you'd said to me, do you want to lead an organization? I'd say, hell no. I just want to do my own thing, but I found it very challenging, and it's pushed me to grow. And I'm sure I've made some mistakes. But the bottom line is, if you're a leader, your responsibility is to have an overview and have a vision and a mission. And your responsibility is to stand by that mission. And whether people like you or approve of you, in the end, is irrelevant. How
do you endure that, Sue, without being killed by it? Because, like, on one hand, we do understand this, and many of us who are leaders have had to endure it. But at the same time, it is painful when it feels like you have haters and you're trying to do something good. How did you endure it? How did you get through it?
That's a good question. Because a few years ago, when all kinds of stuff came up about diversity, which I think was good, it made us much more aware. Due to a conversation that I had online, a whole bunch of people decided that I was obviously a white supremacist, which is a bit crazy because I have two internationally adopted multiracial children, but there you go. But my family looks like the UN. Okay, if you saw my family, we're weird. Okay, we come from every continent, every sexual every orientation, we're just a weird lot. Okay?
Very diverse.
Yeah, very diverse. But everyone decided this, and the cancel culture thing kicked in, and I was totally shocked, first of all, because these are my colleagues who I felt that I'd given to for years. And suddenly, I was I was the oppressor, the bad guy, suddenly, and it was clear to me that none of my usual ways of dealing with it were going to work. I couldn't reply because everything I said proved that I was a white supremacist.
Sort of backed into a corner.
Yeah, I couldn't. There was nothing I could do. So I did something that was very un-Sue Johnson, which is I withdrew. And hey, I'm an attachment theorist. Talked to my wonderful, wonderful, wonderful husband, who is the blessing of my life, who stood with me. And there was a period of time which was very bad, and I felt very alone indeed. But I guess I did what my father told me to do, which is when the world comes for you and you're scared, you take a deep breath, you place your feet out so that you can feel the ground under your feet. You look at the horizon, you can deal with whatever comes, and you listen to my voice. And he taught me to do that, and I did that. And we gradually came back into balance and worked together as a group running ICEEFT, and I found my way back. But I think it changed me. It made me more cynical about our society and about people. It scared me, and it still does, about how we are becoming polarized, and we take group membership as identity. Membership is not identity.
Right.
I am Sue, apart from whatever group you put me in. I am Sue. I'm white. I'm Sue. I'm a professional, but I'm Sue. And so.
And you're also not exempt from the human condition either.
Exactly. So I deserve as much empathy as anyone else, whether I'm the oppressor because I've got some power. Power is an interesting one. People talk about power. Somebody told me the other day that I'm powerful because I'm the director of ICEEFT. I thought being able to talk to the person, I felt like saying, look, actually, I keep trying to give this power away. You know what it is? It's work is what it is. It's responsibility. I've tried to give it away 5 times and nobody wants it. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are you talking about?
One of my favorite quotes on leadership actually came from a series of movies called the Divergent series. And one of the characters said, real leaders don't crave power. They're called by necessity. And I know for you, Sue, you pioneered, if you hadn't done it, who was going to do it? You saw a path, an opening, uncharted territory that was beckoning, and you had the courage, fortitude to follow through with it. And you faced so much oppression that people today have no idea of, right? What that was like for you at a time where such a male dominated field and so many barriers, and when you make a way and you have a platform, you have a voice, but you have responsibility. It's not about power. You have no desire to have power over.
That's right. And the fact of the matter is that the whole cancel culture is a massively hurtful. It's actually designed to undermine your sense of identity. And it's actually oppressive as hell.
Yes.
It's supposed to answer oppression, but it's oppressive as hell. And it took me a while to recover, but I have recovered.
What's ironic, Sue, about what you're saying too, is that it's like trying to correct a system by using the same thing that broke it.
Yes, that's right. That's actually I like that, Annabelle. That's very perceptive. And I think it's changed me in that, to be honest, it's made me even I don't think strong is the word. I don't know what it is. All I know now is that in the past, I'm English, so I can be very assertive, but I'm taught to be polite. I'm supposed to be polite. Okay, that's the way it is, Well, that's gone recently. And I recognize that I actually type. I was typing it the other day. I thought, goodness me, is this me typing this? Because somebody sent me something and I wrote, no, we are not doing that. Here's the reason. And I thought, I would never have sent an email like that to a colleague 5 years ago, never. And I think it's somehow come out of all this, which is no, I will not accommodate. I will accommodate. I will respect you. I will listen to you. I will take your views into account. I'll try to connect with you emotionally. But in the end,
I'm not going to be run over.
In the end, if I'm running this damned organization, I'm running the damned organization. Nobody else wants to run it. So you know what? Sometimes I get to stand up and say, no, I'm doing that. And
there is a boundary and somebody has to lead the band or it all falls apart, and it's not easy. And you get haters from all sides. People say that they want success, but really they want their own success, but they don't want to see you succeed. The higher you climb, the more darts are at your back. But, at the same time, without women like you, you paved the way. You had the courage to make a trail where there wasn't one, and I believe that opened the door for other women in our field to have a voice.
And in the end, it's about whether the mission is worth it.
Yeah.
And it's about reading about these women warriors in this book. What they basically said is, of course, I'm scared. Of course, but you know what? I believe in the mission. The mission's worth it. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And that was like my father saying to me, there are certain fights in life you have to have. And if you don't have them, everyone pays.
Yeah.
And when you go into the fight, you don't say, oh, I'll fight until I get hurt.
Yeah.
You say, I'll fight.
Yeah.
And you fight. And
you're going to sustain hurts along the way. And
you are.
What's
and
ironic is everyone looks to you, looks to leaders and thinks, oh, you're bulletproof. But in fact, it's like you feel everything and there's so many eyes on you and it increases the pressure. And, you take so much. And, I thank you for saying that you felt scared, because often as a leader, I do feel very scared. And, I think a lot of people who are blazing trails, and I imagine, as you're sitting there at these conferences, being the only woman among, in this panel full of men, or, I've heard about some of the things that have gone on at these conferences where people are standing up and shouting at you, challenging you from the audience. These are other colleagues and professionals, which, even if that was another man who was in your shoes, they wouldn't have done that.
Oh, they would not. And and I'm very good at recognizing that these days. I don't do many in person anymore. I do on Zoom, so you have more control. But before COVID, when I was doing lots and lots of in person, I was very good at recognizing that. I remember thinking, oh, misogynist incoming. Like here it goes. This is this man would never say this to another man. Okay, jolly good. I know the game we're playing now. Right. I pick up my rifle.
Yeah.
Man, don't you, as I said to somebody quite recently, actually, don't you underestimate me. Don't you underestimate. I wouldn't advise it. I'm listening to you and I'm taking you into account and I'm trying to listen, but don't you underestimate me, because in the end, there's a thing on my fridge. Somebody gave it to me. It's a little sticky. It's a cowgirl holding a bunch of rifles, and it says, "Cowgirl up or go sit in the wagon." And it's like, in the end, if women want a better world, we have to be willing to take the hits and realize that not everyone's going to like us and that they're going to discount us and dismiss us. They always have. And that the only way to deal with it is to ally with other brave women and with the men, wonderful men who support us, and to stand up for women's way of being. I think it's more than standing up for women. EFT is all about how important relationships are and how much they can give us. That's worth fighting for, as a principle. Lasting romantic love is an ideal worth fighting for. So if you're going to fight for those things, so what, you get injured? Yeah, right. Is the fight worth it? Yes, the fight's worth it. And should we listen to women's relational wisdom, of which they have eons of relation? Yes, we should. And do women have a particular gift to give society because they can tune into emotions and they do know something about love and care that is kind of cut off from a lot of men unfairly, right? But yes, we have huge wisdom about this. Like at one point, there was an argument that women shouldn't fight in the military because it would wreck the cohesion of the fighting group. Men were bands of brothers, and then they actually did some research and found that actually the fighting groups that had women integrated in them had more cohesion and more togetherness. And because women know how to go into a group, and this is huge generalization, you understand, but it's part of women's DNA. That the way we survived was to connect with other people and connect with each other and help each other survive. That's the way we've survived. And there's a huge wisdom in that. So in the end, you look at your mission and you say, I do, in the end, Do I believe in this mission? How much do I believe in it? Is it worth fighting for? Is it worth getting hurt for, struggling for? If the answer is yes, well then you do it, don't you? I mean, what else are you going to do? Go and make pies? Also, I can make pies, but you know what I mean? Like go and like, that's it. Right.
Yeah.
And then you tell your kids, you've modeled for your kids, hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah. And it takes a lot of courage to muscle through that adversity. I mean, some of the wars that you fought, people have witnessed, but there's a lot of invisible wars that you've had to fight.
You better believe a few years ago, if you looked at my email, I mean, people thought I was getting attacked. They had no idea. Okay, people were trying to annihilate me. It's like, what? Where's all this aggression coming from? But private stuff is, and
it does. I always say, like, being a leader, especially if an organization, is kind of like being a windshield of a car. Whatever explodes in the car hits the windshield, but you also take everything from outside as well.
That's right. And I feel like one of the things that's true, and it's terribly understandable, but also very difficult, is that when the bullets start flying, you're up. And so many of your lovely, well-meaning, supportive colleagues don't know what to do, so they duck and hide behind the bush. Well, guess what? You can't duck, so you're up. And there's a point where you're alone and you say, all right, then. I'm alone. So come on. You want to go for me? Well, then come on. But you can't always manage
if it's going to kill me, I'm going to die fighting for a worthy cause.
That's right. But of course, you can't always manage that sometimes. Sometimes you just feel like, how can people say these things to me? How can they possibly dismiss me? Like, how can people, oh my God, this is so hurtful. I don't understand. It
is hard. Those days where you just want to ball up on the couch and just cry and not talk to anybody because you're so hurt, feels like you've just been stabbed in the stomach, and by people that you fought for and fought on behalf for, and I've learned some valuable leadership lessons along the way becoming a community leader. And I think a lot of times, especially in small communities, again, it's if you don't step up, nobody else will. And it is a lot of baptism by fire. And I think a lot of us have committed the fallacy of believing that those who are higher than us are impenetrable, and that, we think, oh, well, we can't endure the bullet. We're not strong enough. We won't survive. So we've ducked. And then the person above us, and I've been the one who's had to take those bullets. And it's like, no, I feel it just as much as you do. And
that's right.
Thanks for,
I tell you, the other thing that hit me a lot in the last couple of years. And maybe it's because I've been doing so much online teaching, and of course all my therapy has been online, but I note somehow that male colleagues, how can I put this? When they talk about their work, they feel completely entitled to say things like, this works because I know it does. And I don't have any research, but this works because I know it does. And this is what I've done. And this is my genius. Whereas women don't usually do that. They usually say, oh, well, the research says that, and we have all this research now, and it implies that. And I've caught myself in the last couple of years, and it's still changing for me, but I'm aware I did my first in-person talk a few weeks ago to my colleagues in Vancouver. And I was aware at some point that I was standing up on the stage and I had let go of the female tentative, oh, well, of course I may be wrong. Oh, well, may I suggest this thing? And I found myself saying, this is what emotion is. This is why we work with it. this is how it works, and that's the way it is. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, this is there's something different about this. What am I? And I suddenly thought, oh, good Lord, I'm talking like a man. I'm saying, I'm asserting the absolute validity of my reality, and then I give you evidence for it, because I believe that you deserve that. You don't just deserve me saying how clever I am. But that's something that women, I think, we need to learn to do too. We need to learn to not be so careful and tentative, and we've had to seek out support and approval and be careful how we put our case out. Well, you know what? Enough.
I gotta think of as you're saying that, I think of sort of some experiences I've had where I felt, around very well-intending and wonderful male colleagues, but sort of this sense of maybe a fear of being judged as being bossy or drama, like terms that get applied to women when they become assertive and they fight their corner, versus when a man does that, they're not considered bossy or drama. You're being a drama queen.
They're not. They're considered right. Whereas, and that's right. And I remember one colleague telling me, you don't get to say any of this. You don't have any research. And I laughed and I said, you should look at the people that you're presenting with at conferences. I have all kinds of incredible research. And this person said, I don't believe you, which was really funny. Okay, I thought, oh, well, what the hell? I'm delusional then, but
and what amazes me is when people feel threatened by the idea of attachment. I mean, obviously you're talking to somebody who's got insecure attachment, that connection to other human beings would feel so threatening, whereas the hallmark of attachment is when you're secure, with your connection, you can be more independent. They shouldn't threaten each other. They should flow healthfully.
And these days I dare, for the last few years, I dare to say things like, EFT is the gold standard of couple therapy and has changed the couple therapy field. And we have brought working with emotion and attachment into the field of psychotherapy. And this is a incredible contribution. I feel okay about saying that. Whereas if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I would have said, oh, well, I'm not sure you could really quite say that. And, have to give.
You're also not just pulling this out of the air, Sue. I mean, this was the APA. This wasn't like Cosmo magazine or you just making this proclamation, of yourself. This was hard work that you put into it, and a title that was earned by a reputable academic organization that's well respected in the field. You deserve that. And that's what you fought for.
It's hard for women to believe they deserve that. We still put out our views often as somehow tentative, whereas a man will stand up and say, this is the way it is. And I like my present identity better. I like being able to say, no, this is the way it is. And, we have over 30 research studies that, and I can show it to you on tape. I can show you what creates change in individuals, in their anxiety and depression. I can show you what creates change in couples. I can code it. I can relate it to outcome. I can relate it to follow up 3 years later. Can you do that? Oh, no, you can't. Oh, you have one study. One study? Are you kidding? Oh, well, hey, you know what then? I get to say this. And you have to take me on to say that's not true. Whereas, I think women's position before was, if you're awfully nice and you're awfully polite and you say things in a way that doesn't scare people, then maybe you'll get listened to. Well, to hell with that.
Well, what's the quote? Well-behaved women rarely make history.
That's right.
And Sue, you've made history. I mean, your name is in textbooks.
Wow.
I studied about you when I was in my master's. I was in New York. I was blessed to be able to come take an externship with you in person. I thought, oh my gosh, this would be like, back in the day, if Freud was alive, being able to take a lecture from him, like to actually speak to a pioneer, someone who created something, and to, if you're a cook, having Chef Emerald come to your kitchen and cook with your pots and pans, like how exciting would that be? So it was so amazing. And it's so amazing to even speak with you now. I mean, you have fought so hard, so many haters. And as somebody who's not achieved anywhere close to what you've achieved, that you're so relatable, and, just being able to hear the things that you've gone through also validates, as a leader, whether you're a man or a woman, or however you identify, the fear, that you really do feel. We look on the outside like we got it all together, but we're terrified on the inside. A lot of the leaders I know have ulcers and all kinds of stomach issues, because they're holding all this pain on the inside and feeling like an outsider. And that's sort of like the number one experience that I hear from fellow leaders and even clients of mine that are also striving for leadership. And I sort of think of like a sheep and a shepherd, and you think, well, how many sheep are there in a flock ratio to a shepherd? You may have 10,000 sheep and one shepherd, maybe a couple. Like the odds, always small.
Yes, what comes up for me, Annabelle, is, and this may be a pretentious thing to say, hey, that's a very female response.
Right.
I teach people how to, on one level, I teach people all over the world how to do therapy. I'm very honored to teach people, people in Egypt, people in Australia, people in Finland, people in Iran, people in England.
Still in cultures where women aren't allowed to be therapists and speak for men. And
I'm very honored to be doing that, and I'm very honored that I got the opportunity. But in the end, as I tried to say in the last chapter of Love Sense, maybe it's my vision is, in the end, what is at stake here exactly? Well, from my point of view, it's not just making people more equal and recognizing that everyone is valuable, and that recognizing women as having a valuable thing, and even helping people have better love relationships. What is at stake exactly? Well, from my point of view, what is at stake is, are we going to really understand with and deal with who we are, how our nervous system is structured, our basic vulnerabilities and needs? Are we going to come together and deal with the fact that we have huge problems, like we're wrecking this planet, and we can no longer seem to talk to each other if we disagree? This is an enormous problem. Are we going to survive? Put it another way, are we going to have something called civilization?
Mm-hmm.
When Gandhi went to London, the Indian rebel who wanted England to let go of India, mm-hmm. Somebody asked him, what do you think of English civilization? Mm-hmm. And Gandhi said, I think it would be a very good idea. Okay, and my take in the last chapter of Love Sense was me saying, hey, understanding ourselves and understanding how much we need others, and understanding how we get caught in blocks inside ourselves and between each other and see each other as the enemy. Understanding this is not optional, not at this point in human history, if we want to survive, but if we want to have something called civilization. And I personally don't think we've ever had it. I think we have an ideal, we move towards it sometimes. And I talked in that book about the image I had of civilization, which is ironic given what's just happening in the world, which is that I was in Jerusalem, which on the one hand, the three religions there are all the religions of Abraham. So you'd think we could talk to each other, but no. I was in Jerusalem, and there were young Israeli soldiers with guns everywhere, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre was a very strange place that even as somebody who'd been brought up in Christianity, I couldn't quite connect with. And I looked down this street, this old street, And there were two little girls. I don't think one of them must have been about 2 and one of them must have been about 3. And they were walking along hand in hand in this. There was nobody around taking care of them in this ancient city that has been the source of hatred and conflict and, our ability to demonize each other forever. Mm-hmm. And here they were walking down that street. And I thought, that is civilization. And we're miles from there. We're miles. And that's what's at stake. We're going to be as human beings. And are we going to grow towards civilization, which is all about our relationships, or not?
Yeah, with humanity.
Well, in these days, it's pretty depressing out there. We all seem to be.
And despite knowing what's causing depression, we keep doing more of that. And it's
we're so good at creating the things that distress us. It's just not true.
Yeah.
Right? We're so good at creating isolation and there's a huge
demonizing connection, even though it's the very thing that we need, and we even have an EFT trainer out of Arkansas. We'll give a shout out to Ryan Reyna. He's amazing. And he talked about the myth of independence. He's like, even if you're on your own and you go to the gas station, somebody still had to put the gas in the gas pump. You still have to go to a checker and buy the gas. Somebody had to build the gas station. It's really this illusion. We are never, even when we're individual, we are never alone. We can never function, in isolation. And, so I love, attachment is a science about how we human, and EFT gives us a map for how to human better.
Yes. That's lovely. I love that. And there's only so many ways to human. We talk our world is in love with infinite choice. Well, the fact of the matter is human beings can't deal with infinite choice. They just start to dissolve. Okay. Yes. And there's some choices that fit with your nervous system and some that don't. And there's only so many ways to be a full human being. And it's not varied. Right. And we need a map. And we've got one. It's called attachment science. And I feel like if I could do anything in the world, I'd stand up and scream in the middle of all the big cities and say, guys, yoo-hoo-hoo, we've discovered so much in the last 20 years. We've discovered, all this incredible science telling us who we are and what we need. Yay! Are we going to pay attention? And the main answer is no, because it's not about making money and it's not about power. So,
right. It's an inconvenient truth. And so I know we have to wrap up and round the corner, but I want to, say to those watching that EFT, whether you're coming for EFIT, EFT for couples, or EFFT for families, EFT is all about teaching us how to love and be loved effectively. And Sue, I think for you as a leader, if I could take away a message for other leaders, is that be prepared to fight some battles. Have the courage. Know that you're going to take a lot of hits that are going to be painful. And it may feel like it's going to kill you at times, but it won't. You will survive. And really the task upon you, which is sort of what you saw, and I think any good leader will see, is once you recognize an opportunity for our humanity to grow, to be better, you can't unsee that. And when you see that trail not taken and the opportunity for advancement of our culture, of our civilization, a good leader is going to sort of have this conviction in their spirit and know that the mission is worth it, worth the risk, worth the pain.
Yes. And some journalist asked me a few months ago, which completely floored me. She said, well, you've done so much and you've done all this research and your name's out there and you've changed all this. And, why do you feel compelled to, you're saying you want to walk your dogs and, go to your cottage and be with your partner and, do your gardening. I'm an obsessive gardener. But you don't, so you go and do these podcasts. And why do you do that? And it floored me. I thought, Yeah, why do I do that? Why don't I just, potter in my garden? And that would be much more sensible. Why? And I tell all my friends to do that, don't work so hard. And what came up, which I thought was fascinating from deep inside, is it's my duty.
Mm.
If you're a human being and you care about being a human being and you feel you have something to offer, you know what? It's your duty. That's just part of.
Yeah.
That's what I was taught, perhaps by my father. It's just what you do. It's your duty. You don't.
And you're like the psychotherapy Gandhi, because you are trying to help us come together, it's not about power. It's not about coercion. It's about love and connection. That's what it's about. You're trying to help us come together and have unity and love each other more effectively for the betterment of humankind, so that we can treat each other with kindness and dignity and respect, whether it's romantic love or platonic love or family love or whatever kind of love. It helps us human better. And if we could have that opportunity, why not take it?
It helps us human better. And all the recent stuff about, identity and all that stuff going on, what's alarming is that it feels to me like we're dismissing some of our basic rituals and organizations that have supported human connection, like the family. And, I think this is a craziness. We need to not just look at what we consider our political identities or our group.
Right. Or get stuck in our pain, because I think when people get hurt enough, their heart hardens, and then they assume, well, I'm going to try to find a way to do the same thing without connection. And that past hurt of maybe failed connection or painful attachment has allowed our hearts to become hardened against each other.
That's right. And once that happens, we deal with that in distressed couples forever. And you can work with that. You can work with it in families. You can even work with it in ICEEFT, where people have hardened themselves against their own vulnerability. They've said, I will not accept this. This is strange. I will, as my client said to me, I don't want to feel okay. I said, all right. And she said, but I can't live like this. I can't live numb. And so here's the dilemma, and I said, yeah, but it's so hard for you, isn't it, to even imagine yourself as this child of this age and actually see her face and see she's vulnerable. And she says, I can't see her. I can't see her. Basically, she's saying, I'm not going to look. And I say, okay, it's too hard right now. Let's look at how hard it is for you to even see that little person's face and see that she's vulnerable. That strength for human beings is about knowing who you are, knowing you're vulnerable, knowing you're fragile, and dealing with that in a way that you can integrate it and you can find your balance, and it empowers you to know what it is you need. That is strength. And our other ideas of strength,
well, endurance and perseverance also build strength.
Yes. And the more you belong, the more you become. We know that, the more you feel like you belong and you matter to somebody else, the easier it is for you to say, hey, I matter. Hey,
yeah.
Maybe I have something important to say. Hey, this is part of, we're all busy trying to, well, from my point of view, we're all busy on this journey. None of us understand the journey. Reality moves all the time. Right? We're all busy trying to sort of help each other along this path, but goodness, surely we can start to agree about a little bit about the path we're on and pick good destinations, can't we? Maybe.
Yeah.
Where EFT tries to do that, it tries to contribute, in my mind, not just to relationships, which is big enough, not just to cracking the code of love, that's big enough, not just to psychotherapy, that's big enough, but I'm pretentious enough to think that EFT is supposed to contribute to our attempts to reach civilization and to be who human beings have the ability to be at our best. At our best, I mean, at our best, we're a stunning, amazing, creative, incredible species. And at our worst, oh wow. We're destroyers. We're I don't know what we are.
If we choose to be. And there's a message of hope in attachment. And I know we got to round the corner and finish up here, but I want to sort of leave with this, because, you know, what you're saying, Sue, is just really amazing. And if you're watching this and you're a leader, you're a pioneer, you know, we talked about the sheep and the shepherds, and being a leader is a lonely walk, but there are other shepherds out there. And, you know, hopefully by listening to Sue's story, as you're fighting a battle in whatever field you might be in, maybe it's in psychotherapy as well, or in a community or wherever, that your battle will be worth fighting, and that you would know from Sue's story, even if you don't know how it's going to turn. I'm sure when you started, you had no idea where EFT was going to go or what it was going to be about. But to know that you do belong, that, you know, you may be wondering, is this battle that I'm about to embark on for the betterment of humanity, is it going to matter? And
the other thing about that is sometimes we think we're sheep, but when we go inside and look at our emotions and really listen to ourselves, we can turn and make a contribution that is stunning and amazing and important and turns things around. So, you know, I think everyone has the ability to have moments of leadership, and it's only completely crazy people like me who get stuck in that role and sometimes get totally squished by it, but
have the courage to fight the fight worth fighting for. And
is the fight worth fighting for? Is the, you know, there's some phrase from I'm a Buddhist too, right? I'm a bad Buddhist, but there's some phrase that says, what are you going to do? I said this to my son. I can't remember. I can't do it right now, right? But basically it says, what are you going to do with your one precious short life? Decide what you're going to do. Are you going to make it count? And my response to that is, you betcha. Let's make it count. You're like, no, I'm like, all right, life is short. We're all scared. You know, anything can happen. Uncertainty is the name of the game. But, you know, you betcha. Let's decide what we want to do with our one precious life.
Yes.
And then let's go for it. What the hell?
Yeah.
What else? What else is there to do?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No matter, you know, where you might be standing and wondering how it's going to turn out, you know, hopefully you'll feel inspired by Sue to know that anything that contributes to humanity is worth it, you know, is meaningful and does matter. And I hope that you feel encouraged by Sue's stories, by the journey that she's traveled, that in a world of haters, that you too can make a difference, that you can create something great, that you can create something meaningful that can have a positive impact on humanity, on people's lives. And it may be a painful journey. Buckle in, strap yourself in, be prepared for the fight, you know, but there are other shepherds out there who will be with you. And, you know, at the end of the day, regardless of how it turns out, it's stick to the mission and just focus on the impact that you want to have. And so we really do have to wrap up, unfortunately, because I have
fun, Annabelle,
to get to.
I didn't quite know we were going to talk about leadership and things, but this was fun. Thank you.
Yes. And so you have made many contributions, not just books for therapists, but you started writing children's books. And so you have books available for the general public. Hold Me Tight, Love sent some amazing books. You have books for therapists and clinicians and your children's books. Where can everyone find your books?
Oh, you can look at my website, www.drsuejohnson.com. I've only written one, but it's not really a children's book. It's really about EFT put into a story of animals, right? So it's for everyone. But I wrote Edgar and Eloise about a few months ago, and just out of love and just because I loved it. And it's about identity and how we create who we are and how we connect with others, and whether when a fight comes to our world, do we all run away or do we stand together? So it's about those basic things. So you can find Edgar and Eloise on my website. You can find my latest book, which is The Primer in Emotionally Focused Individual Therapy, which I'm very proud of. And I wrote with my wonderful colleague, Leanne Campbell. And we teach together. We teach ICEEFT all over the internet and all over ICEEFT. And we work with PESI as well, our partners. So, and people seem to be really responding to emotionally focused individual therapy. Yeah. And of course, we're very proud of our work in couples and families too. So people can go there, or they can go to ICEEFT, ICEEFT, although I think of EFT as pretty warm, but ICEEFT.com. And they can look at books. There's all kinds of things on YouTube. I can't believe how many bits of me there are on YouTube these days.
Yeah.
Some of them really weird. Okay, but anyway, it's
amazing. And I will make sure to put a link to your website on both for ICEEFT and for drsuejohnson.com in the description for this video. So people
and also I want to say, because my colleagues will get really mad at me, Hold Me Tight is still being sold across all kinds of cultures and languages. And of course, we have a Hold Me Tight online program that people can take, which I'm very proud that our US military and our Canadian military use to help military families. And the big hospital in the capital of Canada, the Heart Hospital, uses it to help people recover from heart attack, because if you're going to recover from heart attack, you're going to do it with somebody else, not all by yourself. Yeah. And so Hold Me Tight online is there. We feel the need to educate the public as well as therapists. We just want to grow people, basically.
Yeah. And that's a wonderful thing. So if you're watching this video, if you're a therapist, check out ICEEFT.com. Again, I will put the link in the description for this video. And you can find a list of EFT trainings all over the globe, and even Sue's trainings. If you want to go take a workshop with Sue directly, it's available there. And you can also learn more about Sue at drsuejohnson.com, learn more about EFT on both websites. And I really hope that you will check out Sue's websites, order her books, check her out on YouTube. And if you are interested in finding an EFT therapist in your area, you can go to ICEEFT.com, and there's a spot to find a therapist. And you can type in your zip code or your state or your country and find a therapist in your area. And they are all over the globe, and it's ever expanding. So just go ahead and pop over there, and you can find an EFT therapist to work with. And I hope that if you are a leader and you're watching this, that you'll feel inspired by Sue's journey and know that you too can make a difference, and that you'll have the courage to fight whatever battle you're fighting for the betterment of humanity, for a worthy cause, and, continue on that journey and not let the bullets take you out and keep you from doing a worthy mission. So thank you, Sue, so much for being with us today.
Well, welcome. It was lots of fun. Thank you, Annabelle. I appreciate you.
Thank you. And thank you so much to our viewers. Make sure that you guys hit subscribe. We finally hit 10,000 subscribers, which is amazing. So thank you guys for watching, for your support, and just make sure that you hit subscribe, because as always, more videos are on the way.
Don't forget to buy my book, Using Relentless Empathy in the Therapeutic Relationship, Connecting with Challenging and Resistant Clients for Helping Professionals. Available on Amazon or on my website, www.drbugatti.com.